All right, Brian, in part two of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're going to be talking keys to victory for Notre Dame's offense in their senior day matchup this Saturday afternoon with Syracuse. Kickoff is at 3:30 p.m. inside of Notre Dame Stadium. Final regular season home game for Notre Dame this year. And right now, the Irish are currently favored by 35.5 points by our friends over at FanDuel, which is a pretty hefty margin. But Notre Dame is the current winners of 8 games in a row, and unfortunately, the Syracuse Orange have lost 6 games in a row after the unfortunate injury to quarterback Steve Angeli. But like we do every week, we're diving into keys to victory here, and we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. And Brian, you and I talked a lot putting this list together for both the offense and the defense. And yes, Notre Dame has to respect every opponent. And to a degree, we at Irish Breakdown do talk about respecting every opponent that you play. But like we said yesterday, folks, this isn't a scenario where if Notre Dame doesn't come out firing on all cylinders, Syracuse could rip off an upset in South Bend. They're not. They're struggling right now. Injuries have plagued them. They're starting a redshirt freshman or a freshman walk-on quarterback. Fran Brown has struggled this year, and it's not just on him. They've overcame a lot. There have been some staff changes. But that being said, this is about, look, playoffs are right around the corner for this team. And there are some things that we have to see that fall in line with keys to victory and what we have to see with them moving forward that are going to be crucial in this one, Brian. This is an interesting matchup in South Bend on Saturday.
It is, Trevor. I mean, this is interesting, not from the Notre Dame-Syracuse matchup is interesting. It's interesting from the standpoint of what is Notre Dame going to be? Who are they going to be in this game? What fuels them? Have they learned, as Marcus Freeman tries to get all his teams to learn, it's not about your opponent, it's about you? Have they learned that? I don't think this team always felt that way early in the year. I'm hoping that the last couple games kind of are part of the evolution process where they've just dominated 2 ranked opponents. I mean, people keep talking about, oh, they don't play anybody. I'm like, literally their last 2 games were against college football playoff ranked teams. Because Navy was in the first college football playoff ranking. That weekend, Notre Dame beat them by 39. Pitt was in was Pitt in both? Pitt was in the first 2 because they were ranked, and then they had a bye, so we said they're not going to fall out because they have a bye.
Well, then they actually went up.
Right. But yeah, they went from
lost.
24 to 22. Right. And then they played Notre Dame, got destroyed, and now they're out. So, if Pitt would have played Notre Dame as close as Missouri played Alabama, Pitt's probably still ranked. But they didn't because they got destroyed by Notre Dame. So this is about Notre Dame. This is a game where you look at and say, who is Notre Dame? And now that there's this, what's in front of them, can they come out against an inferior opponent and be focused on doing their job? And that's what a lot of our keys are going to be about today, Trevor, is part of it's, you got to do X and, A, B, and C against Syracuse, but this is more about Notre Dame growing as a football team. And that's what a lot of our keys are going to be. And so it's not so much if you do this, you can neutralize this advantage that Syracuse might have. There's literally 0 advantages that Syracuse has. This game is about Notre Dame. And Notre Dame showing maturity as a football team to say, hey, we're going to go out there and handle our business because we're Notre Dame. And that's the reality of it. So as we dive into the offensive keys, Trevor, just keep in mind, folks, that's kind of where a lot of these keys are. These are keys about Notre Dame showing us something about Notre Dame and then taking the fight to Syracuse the way that they're capable of, more so than a reaction to what they're good at. So like last week, looking at Pitt offensively, we're saying you got to try to find some balance on offense. Why? Because this is a really good Pitt defensive, like front and linebacking core, and they're good against the run. It was specific to what you have to do to beat Pitt. With Syracuse, there's a million different ways they could beat Syracuse. So this is more about this football team growing. And so that's what our focus is going to be on.
Like we do every week, Brian, we're going to start with key number 1 on the offense, and it begins with starting fast. And that is something that this team hasn't done consistently. Consistency is kind of the base of this argument, of really some of these keys. They didn't start fast against Pitt. They missed a field goal on their first offensive possession while starting, I believe, in Pitt territory after a 4th down sack by Josh Burnham. Yeah. And they didn't come away with points.
2 of their first 3 possessions started in Pitt territory. The other one started at their own 46. I think.
Yeah. They started fast against Navy, scored on their first offensive possession. They didn't against Boston College. And I'm looking right now, and they did against USC as well. So it's kind of been this yes, no type of pattern for Notre Dame with the playoffs looming around the corner. It is now time to, hey, especially with the two level of opponents that you have coming up, it's time to start stacking these and start fast, hot out of the gate.
I think the biggest thing for me with starting fast in this game, Trevor, is just shows us where this team's focus is.
Yeah.
If they don't come out and just kind of really take it to Syracuse early, it tells me that this offense is not locked in. They're just not. They're not. And it also tells me that this coaching staff struggles with what makes this team click. And they're not able to push the right buttons to really get this offense to come out smoking hot. That's what it would tell me. These are not games. These are the games where, for the most part, however, this season, they have come out and started fast. I mean, Purdue, Arkansas, Navy. The BC game in this regard is the anomaly. When you look at how Notre Dame has fared against far inferior opponents. I don't view Boise as far inferior. I don't view NC State as far inferior. They didn't come out great in either one of those games, but this is not that. This team is far below those. So I think this is something where the coaching staff has to prove that we have the pulse of this team and we know what to do to push the right buttons to make sure this team is focused. Because if they're focused, they'll perform well. Part one, that's part two, is just kind of getting into a rhythm, building confidence. I think the next two games for the offense are going to be really important towards really getting CJ Carr to the point where he's not pressing as much. I think CJ feels he's got to do all these things to go out there and win football games. I got to make this play and this big throw, getting him out of some bad habits, like, locking in on receivers and be better at like just reading the defense as opposed to just like, post snap as opposed to just the pre-snap reads, getting into some rhythm, getting some momentum, getting the offensive line really going in the run game, all these different things. And we'll talk about some of these more specifically. But like that's what starting fast is. It's about building some momentum and some confidence and really get this unit clicking as you go into the period of time between the end of the regular season and the playoffs. And of course, part of starting fast too is you need a dominant win these next 2 weeks. You have to look like an elite team. You have to look like that top 5 team that we all think that they are, and put this team away early, because there is going to be some comparisons of, well, this is what Miami did to Syracuse. Well, they were beating them 14-0 at halftime, beat them 38-10. They were only beating Stanford 7-7 at halftime, but they beat them 42-7. That's going to get looked at as you get closer to the end of the season. And if Miami is able to climb up the ranks, those are when those things come into play. So you need to make sure that everything else you have in comparison to Miami is significantly better. So I think all of those things are part of it, coming out fast. But it's more so just about this team finding it. So CJ Carr can't be worried about, we got to score 70 points in order to impress the playoff committee. That's more us just talking about it. Mike Denbrock can't be worried about that, because then you start getting out of your normal routine. Just come out, focus, locked in, and say, every time we touch the ball, we're going to go score. That's really what it boils down to, because we can.
Yeah.
And so we're going to finally be who we, not finally, because they have had some great moments, but we're going to be the best version of ourselves, which some weeks we show and some weeks we don't.
Yes.
And this week we are.
Finally be consistent is a good way to put that, Bryan. And I think you're spot on. If they just come out and execute, they start fast, which leads us into our second point, which is, more creativity and, more consistency in the run game. Again, common theme here is consistency. Putting up 50 points, 60 points, or whatever they are capable of, that's a byproduct of just handling business. To your point about CJ pressing and feeling like they have to do this, and Mike Denbrock feeling like they have to do that. Starting fast, and then key number 2, consistency in the run game is going to be huge. And this is actually something that I'm very curious to see how this plays out on Saturday, because there has been a common theme so far this season that when Notre Dame is in a position where they're playing a like opponent, I don't want to say like an equivalent opponent, because I don't know if I'm ready to put USC on the same level as Notre Dame or Pitt on the same level of Notre Dame. But when, maybe the better way to word it is just not playing a significantly inferior opponent. The run game, there is a vast difference in the creativity in the run game. The creativity in the run game versus BC and Navy was not as creative as what it was with Pitt and USC. And so I'm very curious to see what Mike Denbrock and Joe Rudolph do this week, playing a rush defense like Syracuse that has just struggled all season long. So key number 2, Bryan, consistency in the run game is going to be huge on Saturday and moving forward.
It is, Trev. I mean, if you look at the last 4 games, I mean, the numbers look great. I mean, last 4 games, Notre Dame has rushed for 222.3 yards per game. That's 889 yards. So that'd be what, 73 carries plus 74. That's all. Let me type it in here. 147. So 889 yards divided by 147 carries. So they're at 6.0 yards per carry. On the whole, that looks great. But numbers don't always tell you the story. For example, Notre Dame rushed for 249 yards against Navy. They rushed for 175 against Pitt. I think the 175 against Pitt were more impressive than the 249 against Navy. The 159 against BC was just bad. That was a team you should have run the ball on more. Now, part of it is they loaded the box and said, we're not going to let you beat us running the ball. You're going to have to beat us throwing the ball. And Notre Dame kind of did. And then, of course, they ran for 306 against USC. It's sort of that up and down, up and down. You know, they went 3 weeks in a row. They ran the ball relatively well, 254 against Purdue, 210 against Arkansas, 200 against Boise. And you had a rough game against NC State, 143. USC, you went for 306. I would like to point out that all these rough games and low games all are more than Alabama averages for the season. So, you know, that 143 that Notre Dame had against NC State, which you and I considered like a really bad performance running the football, is still, Trevor, about 45, let me look it up, 45 yards more than what Alabama averages on the season. Notre Dame's disappointing performance of 143 yards against NC State would be the 3rd best total of the season for Alabama running the football. I just want to point that out. So that's a different comment. And by the way, the Alabama high of rushing the season for 212 yards came against Louisiana Monroe. Just want to point that out. But it's a consistency. It's a consistency from a snap to snap basis. And this is what's going to partly happen when you have a bunch of new starters in the lineup. Against USC, you had 1 new starter at center, and you had, you know, he got a little bit of a trial by fire in the second half of the game before because Ashton Craig got hurt in the second half against NC State. But you had that one guy with veterans around him, you know, Billy Schrouth on one side. Well, then Billy goes down in that USC game, and then you're coming into the BC game with now 2 new starters in your lineup, and your entire interior was basically newbies. Redshirt freshman Gerby Lambert, he started all year, but he's still new. It's only his 8th career start. Joe Wadding making his 2nd career start. Absher making his 1st career start. So, of course, there's going to be some inconsistency, and you come out against Navy, and you have similar inconsistency, but you're still able to rip off some big plays. Against Pitt, I think they showed more consistency for the most part. So they got better. And that's why, again, my data had them down for, what did I have, Trev? Like 187 rushing yards, I think is what I had for Notre Dame in that game. Let me pull it up. Against Pitt. Now, the official stats were 175 rushing yards, but obviously sacks are part of that.
Yeah,
and
I think it was 187.
That's 187 on 33 attempts, 5.7 yards per carry. I also took out the swing pass to Jeremiah Love because I know that counts as a run in official stats, but it's not a run, and we're trying to evaluate their job of actually running the football. Yeah. 187 yards on 33 carries against Pitt is really good. And you could see it. You could see them working better together. Now it's building on that because this may you think you're going to get Billy Schrouth in the playoffs. You don't know that for sure. Notre Dame hasn't told us that definitively that that's going to happen. This may be your line, and one of the 2 is definitely going to be starting the rest of the year. So it's about getting them going, getting them on the same page, and developing some consistency. Part of that's schematically calling plays that put them in position to attack the weaknesses of the defense and not just running, you know, mid-zone duo and you know every play. That's part of it too. But really what I'm looking for here is this offensive line has to do one thing the rest of the year. Just get better at putting a body on a body because you have the best backfield in college football. And I don't know that anyone that like has a brain debates that anymore. You just got to get a body on a body and let those guys work. Do that, and this run game will become more consistent. But like you saw it last week, some of the plays where they weren't making plays. It was center gets beat, guard
Yeah.
gets beat, nobody accounts for this guy, nobody blocks that guy. It was some of that stuff. Limit that, and your run game will take off.
And if they're able to do that, Brian, that feeds us into our third point is they're going to have much more success enhancing the passing game. Now, I really like this key, and I'm going to toss this over to you because it's what we've seen so far from Notre Dame in the pass game. I don't want to call it like vanilla, but they have been running some of the same concepts. They've been doing a lot of the same things over the last couple of weeks. And this pass game will have to take a step forward. Not that it's been bad, but it has room to take a step forward before they get to the playoffs as well.
Well, where I look at it, Trevor's, I do think that there is some aspects where teams now have a lot of film on Notre Dame. They know the concepts they like to run, and they're starting to jump them more. And I think that's a part of some of the success that Pitt had in that game. I mean, we're also 2 games removed from arguably their best passing performance of the season against Navy.
Sure.
So like there's but some of that was some wrinkles. We broke it down. There were some wrinkles in that game that we really liked. Against Pitt, we saw a lot of the same things. The cross out backside. We saw some slot fades. We saw some verticals. We didn't really see a lot of wrinkles that I felt like went at Pitt. Now, the danger of adding a bunch of wrinkles is you have a new quarterback. You want him to get comfortable with your base stuff first. So, I mean, I'm not even upset that Mike Denbrock is doing that. It's you have to understand when you have 2 new starting offensive linemen late in the year, you have a redshirt freshman quarterback. You can't just reinvent your passing game every week. You have to allow your young quarterback to get some foundation that he's comfortable with. I think we've seen enough from him in the last few weeks with the mistakes and the positives that I think he's kind of got the base stuff kind of down. Now it's like, okay, let's add some more to it. What does that look like? That's for them to decide. I would like to see more mesh stuff. I don't think they're doing enough with Will Pauling and Jordan Faison to get them on the run. It's still too stationary with the routes that they're running. I want to see some mesh. I want to see some crossers. I want to see some more double moves with Jordan Faison catching quick game underneath. There's some things that we've seen opponents do to Notre Dame, like some of the stuff that they did with Malachi Toney. And I would love to see Notre Dame do some of that with Jordan Faison. Doing some things where you get Jordan Faison to catch the ball on the run. Everything Jordan Faison does right now is stationary. It's hitches, stops, comebacks. And I like those things because he can catch and square you up and go make plays. But let's do some things in the offense that allows Jordan to get running across the field, overs, crossers, unders, reverse pivots, slants. I mean, run a slot fade. But if a team's going to run a slot fade where they're going to try to play the corner out, then maybe have Jordan come out and then come underneath and catch the ball on the run. Just some different wrinkles like that put teams in a bind. These are great games to maybe add a couple things that, you kind of work on. Not that it's a practice game, but they're things that you need. And this is a game where there's lower risk.
Yeah.
You can run those things.
But here's why this is so important. This is why I love this key, Brian, is because against Syracuse and against Stanford, but we'll talk about Syracuse right now, they can get away with doing the same stuff that they ran the last couple of weeks. That's what's important, why we have to see it in this game. Because, look, fact of the matter is you can run the same stuff that you ran against A&M and Purdue and Boise and Arkansas and USC and Navy and Boston College and Pitt that you do against Stanford and arguably win by a wider margin than you did in most of those games. But why it's important is putting yourself in a position to have that success come the postseason when that comes around. I love that key to victory, man. I'm spot on. If they're able to do those things, ideally, they're able to reach what their over-under point total is on FanDuel. Right now, it's set at 43.5. So here's hoping. But arguably the biggest thing, all of this encompassing, starting fast, consistency in the run game, enhancing your pass game. Notre Dame is going to have to find a way to also consistently finish drives. Mm-hmm. Finishing is going to be the final key for this one, and it's going to be huge. Look, Notre Dame put up 28 points on offense. Despite scoring 37 as a team, they put up 28 points on offense against Pitt, and that wasn't because of their inability to move the football, like it was in previous games as well. In between the 20s, Notre Dame is extremely effective. There's a reason why they rank inside of the top 25 in college football in total yards per game, and they're top 10 in the country in yards per play, aren't they? And so finishing drives is going to have to be crucial for them. And it's something that they're going to have to continue working on and do consistently. That's key number 4.
here's the rub. You have to be careful that you don't finish here and it's just because you're just better than Syracuse. There needs to be some level of, okay, we've adjusted, we've made some corrections, we've altered our plan, and now we just have to finish better. I mean, now we just have to grow it, as opposed to, yeah, we were doing the same stuff that hasn't worked against good teams, but it looked better against Syracuse, and so now we feel like we've found answers. That's not really it. Now, if you're doing the same things you've been doing, but you're executing better, quarterback makes a better read, guards block better, whatever, okay, sure, I can kind of live with that, but that's not really always been the case. You've allowed yourself to get out leveraged at times. You've allowed yourself to get outnumbered at times and don't have answers for it. So what are some of those answers? Like, I don't want to see you throw a fade to Malachi Fields at the 5-yard line against Syracuse and Boise State, but you're not willing to do it against USC and Pitt and, some better teams on the schedule. Malachi's got to do a better job running that route. His short area fade against Pitt on Saturday was not good. His further back go route for a touchdown was much better. He's got to do a better job of winning off the line, and that's something that the receivers as a whole, their route technique near the goal line has not been good. They run fades like they run go routes. Well, go route is a completely different structure because a go route allows you to run by the guys, close them off, and things like that. A fade is you have to use your release to gain leverage over the defensive back, but then also to allow yourself more room away from the sideline. And they don't do that. That's something they need to get better at. That's coaching. Coach Brown needs to do a better job there. I wonder if part of that is because he was a smaller receiver, that's not something that's necessarily been in his repertoire, but it's something that absolutely has to be developed and enhanced. And how Jordan Faison's going to win off the line is going to be different than Malachi Fields is going to win off the line. But you have to be better at both of it and add some of that to it. But this is a game to say, okay, but I still don't mind seeing it to Malachi or Eli Raridan if you think it's something that's going to be a bigger part of what you do down the road. So part of it just gets better at what you are doing, but then also be willing to adjust and adapt and alter some things to make yourself better, because you have to be able to go out in games, Trevor, and finish. And this is the thing that's frustrating about this team. There's so many fans that are just like constantly complaining. We had a question yesterday about the offense. Do we have to just cope with how the offense is? Do you have to cope with it being a top 10 offense? Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry that this top 10 offense is doing that to you, that you have to cope and just accept the fact they're a bottom of the top 10 offense. And I get frustrated with those responses and those overreactions, while at the same time understanding what's at the heart of them. So my whole thing is, I can understand your frustration, but I think you're taking your conclusion to too far of a ridiculous extreme. Acting like this isn't a really good offense is an emotional overreaction to your frustration for the fact that they're not better in the red zone. I'm frustrated that they're not better in the red zone. They need to be better in the red zone. You know who else is frustrated they're not better in the red zone? Mike Denbrock, CJ Carr, Jeremiah Love. I promise you, they have to get better there. But that means they go from being a 6-10 offense to a 1-2 offense. Like, do you guys understand that? Like, that's where they are. It's not that they're a top 25 offense and they need to finish better to become a top 15 offense or top 10 offense. They're already a top 10 offense. They have a shot to be the best offense in the country. I'm not saying they will be. They have a shot to be. And if they're going to do that, enhancing the pass game a little bit schematically and getting better in the scoring zone is huge for that. And, you see it over and over again. Boise State, you turn it over on downs inside the 5. I think they also, or was that NC State? They threw a pick against NC State inside the 15-yard line. Or was that Boise? They threw the pick against NC State.
They did it against NC State against Boise State. Their first drive of the game was a turnover on downs on 4th.
Right, inside the 10. You got it down to the 1. You had the stupid false start in the Wildcat, moved you back in it. I'm not scoring. Also against NC State, you fumbled the ball inside the 5-yard line. That's 2 scores right there where all of a sudden it's 50-something to 49-7, 50-something to 7, and we're having a different conversation about how Miami's 41-7 win over them. So much more impressive. You know, you look at the NC State, I mean, the USC game. You had a 10-point win over a ranked team. Imagine if that game would have gone how it should have gone, meaning you don't throw an interception inside the 5-yard line, and at the very least you settle for a field goal there. And they ended up missing, 2 field goals or another field goal that game. So at the very least, if you could just make a field goal, it's a 40-24 game. Looks a little better. So like all those things factor into it, where it's not about what can they do to get good on offense. It's they're already good. What can they do to be elite on offense? And that's where finishing comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this isn't an offensive key to victory. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. I just wanted to echo it. Get Eric Schmidt some much needed practice reps, you know, given the situation. You laid it out yesterday. You know, if it's a 0-0 ball game and it's, 4th and 3 from the 29-yard line, don't trot him out for a field goal. Go for it. I get that. But fixing a lot of the struggles in the kicking game, I think, kind of sets off a positive chain reaction for Notre Dame, because then they're not in a spot where they have to go for it on 4th and 3 and on the goal line and risk that getting worse. Because a lot of this is coming from the notion that, short yardage offense has to get better. Yes, it does. Red zone offense has to get better. Yes, it does. They also shouldn't be in a scenario that they have to go for it on 4th down every single time they cross the 40-yard line. So both things can be true. So fixing the kicking game would also go a long way in fixing the red zone offense.
Here's the other thing too, Trevor. It's sort of a not even a counter, because it's not a counter, because what you're saying is correct. It'd be nice to have the option of kicking a field goal when we needed to. When you look at it as an offense, where 4th and goal from the 5 might be a little too far away to otherwise try it, but hey, we'll give it a whirl. Now on Saturday it worked out. They ended up scoring a touchdown, but there's other games they haven't scored on those 4th down calls. But it'd be nice to also go for it on 4th down a lot more, not because you don't trust your kicking game, but because that's how confident you are in your red zone and scoring zone offensive scoring. So they're going for it more because they don't trust the field goal game, but they're not good enough at it to have that sort of that sort of confidence in it. Imagine where they are, where, hey, I'm going to go for it because I know that we have a great shot at getting it here. And that's more so where you want that to come from. So it's not even the number of times they've gone for it that bothers me. It's, to your point, I think you're correct. They're not doing it because they are that confident in their ability to score in those situations, because they haven't earned that right to be that confident. It comes down to they don't have any confidence whatsoever in their kicking game. Yeah. I want them to get to the point where they find some answers in the red zone and in the scoring zone where it's like, no, we're going for it here because we're there. Or here's a crazy thought. You don't get the 4th down. You don't get the 4th and goal because you executed better on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Those are all parts of it.
Folks, that is going to do it for part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. But we're going to finish up today's show by talking about the keys to victory for the Notre Dame defense. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel as well as the CFB Nation channel. Bill Bender and Bill Trocchi are going to go live tomorrow morning, preview this upcoming week's of games. And then tomorrow night, Vince and I are going live at 8 p.m. Eastern time for this week's edition of the Spread Option. So I'm not going to want to miss either of those shows. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com.